shortly I invite us into a meditation. I'll just drop in a few ideas around that. But before I add any particular flavors to our experience, and just from this place, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more settled, maybe we even feel a little bit more welcomed by others, fully welcoming ourselves as much as we can. What's your day feeling like it needs? What's the world around you feeling like it needs? And we can view meditation as a form of cultivation of beautiful qualities of heart, mind, and body. Beautiful intentions for our life. Beautiful in this sense, really meaning wholesome, that really meet the whole being, bring us towards wholeness, the wholesome qualities, the skillful actions. And it doesn't have to be profound, just what comes when you reflect on that. In this day, in this moment, in this being, in this world. What would you like to see more of? What would you like to contribute? What would you like to plant the seeds of? Or support the development of the sprouting of in this world at this time? Maybe just sitting with that, letting that be with you. And equally, if you'd like to, you can put them into the chat. And of course they can be personal, and as personal as you wish to write. And they can be kind of general, universal. Transcend the individual in that sense. So if you wish to, feel free to put those into the chat, and I'll just name a few as they flow through. Qualities we wish to develop. And as I name them, or as we read them, seeing what resonates in us as we read another's or we express our own. Patience. In that moment, can we actually have the patience to cultivate patience? Care. Feel what's needed to care, and caring for care. Appreciation. It's interesting, just as we see these, how far away do these feel? How far away are we imagining them to be? And actually, how close are they? Is there already presence when we're looking for presence? When we write lightness and playfulness, is it already there as the keys tap? Love and understanding. So it's inviting you to bring that intentionality into this body, heart, mind moment. And let's take half an hour for some practice together. Bringing that sense of inclusion, bringing that sense of equanimity, that playfulness. And something I like to consider when we begin a meditation, just that sense like we welcomed, just checking in that we get to know How's the body right now? The energy in the body, what feels like the right posture for the body? And if you're happy to be connected with the body, perhaps a body-based practice is going to be supportive there. Feeling the contact of the body on the chair, the seat, the aliveness of our sensations. Or feeling the breath flowing into, nourishing the body with breath. Before we go too far into the meditation space, just checking, how's the heart doing today? That question makes sense to ask. How's the heart? If the heart is tender, or if the heart is closed, or if the heart feels open, can that intention that in some ways arose from the heart, arose into the heart, can that be supported, given space, soothed, allowed to open, allowed to melt, whatever you feel is helpful there. You may notice that intention alone can begin to do some work. And if that's the case, then we can be so gentle in this way, allowing things to melt, to unfreeze, to free. It might correlate through the body as well, or in the subtle energies of the body. Likewise, we can play with the uprightness of the posture, the leaning forwards or backwards in the posture. Support the heart, the feeling sense of the world in the heart. Again, we can return to this anytime, many times, but just want to check before we go too far here. How's the mind? How's the thinking activity of the mind in this moment? Is there space to not be entangled in the flow of thoughts? There's space to not be identified with the thoughts that are playing in the radio of the intellect, broadcasting thoughts. Is there energy? Is there dullness? Just getting to know. Getting to know what maybe is needed. Is it more space? Can we open some space? Space behind, space above, that we often don't tune into. And have a mind more sky-like, more skyward inclined. Or if it's dull and listless, maybe bring a bit more gathering. Body into mind, mind into body. If the body's the not right thing, sounds and space. So that's what I wanted to guide today, this little exploration of body, of heart, of the intellect of the mind. And then bringing our intention into being in this moment. What's the practice for you going to look like? Just every so often, just some little reminders, keep us on the path. On the next out breath, it's really relaxing and arriving, becoming familiar, getting to know this being we find ourselves to be. Maybe in the next out breath, the shoulders can soften. Noticing what's the mind activity we can get to know. Is there a lot of thinking, not a lot of thinking? Is there steadiness? It's a bit dull, dark. Is it helpful to imagine a bit more brightness, either with the breath or just in the attention itself, in the body? Don't have to go straight into the thinking areas, just more expanse, more brightness. Or if there's too much energy, is it helpful to remember the space behind, above, or a sense of grounding, as if we have roots coming down from the lower parts of our body. So just noticing, how's the form of the body now? Has the posture collapsed a bit? Is it helpful to open it up again? Are we leaning forwards or backwards? Is there space or attentiveness sufficient for the more subtle aspects of experience, we might call emotions or heart quality? You felt as a subtle energy in the being, in the body. Something we can breathe with, through, something we can listen to if we're working in the realm of sound. Supporting yourself to be present, supporting yourself to be sensitive to how you are in this moment, what you need. As we head towards our intentionality that we shared together. Supporting the growing of kindness through kindness, of patience through patience. Inviting you again as we come into the last 5 minutes or so of practice. How's the body, heart, mind in this moment? Are we able to cultivate what feels needed? To steady, to open, to enliven into the intentions that we shared. I invite you to notice another aspect of our experience. You notice that there's a self-sense of the meditator, the one practicing here. Also a kind of image in mind, body, heart. This image, this idea, sometimes appearing and evaluating. How's the meditation going? Creating a thing out of this flowing experience can be useful at times. Other times it's fixing something. In all of this flowing experience, all of this flowing body, heart, mind experience, nothing to fix a meditation onto, nothing to fix a person onto. What's needed now in body, heart, mind to shape this experience towards our deepest intentions? And can we do that? allowing whatever feels fixed to find a sense of flow. And just beginning to transition through the meditation posture into gently opening the eyes, moving the body. So I'd like to share some reflections on and related to, more than on, perhaps, the themes that we were exploring in this meditation just gone by. So I think my microphone is catching on my jumper a little bit. Just adjust that in case that was happening for you. And just a little bit of a sense that in the end of the meditation, as we're kind of looking at our experience, how quickly and easily a sense of kind of fixity arises. Yeah, that a meditation. We had a meditation. It's made up of these flowing moments. We had a sense of self that is meditating, becoming the meditator, and perhaps now feels like it's not a meditator. It's now someone else, something else, doing something else. How that doing and being interplay of our experience. And it's been something that's been in my heart and mind, considering around my own practice and other people's practice I get to talk to and listen to. So I'd like to share a few ideas around there, and maybe that kind of spark a conversation. A little bit around how the Dharma conceives of this self coming into being and passing out of being, and how we can kind of skillfully dance around there, between the extremes of neither self nor not self, which is quite an interesting area. Maybe just before we dive into that, just to mention, this is a freely offered space, and you're very welcome to come into it, benefit from it, and pass it on. It's freely offered in that sense. It's also freely offered to be freely open to receiving. So it's in the spirit of dana, and dana is in many ways an expression of freedom. Some of you will know that there's this word that often gets translated as clinging or attachment in the Dharma, and it's actually it's called upadana, and upadana probably is best expressed as the clenched fist, like living like with a clenched fist. Imagine if you went to the shops and everything you wanted to buy you had to buy with a clenched fist. It'd be very, very difficult. These two clenched fists around one banana, getting around like this. It's very, very difficult to live in this way. And in a certain sense, that's why nature, everything doesn't live that way. The trees outside our windows are giving oxygen. They're not like, can you form an orderly queue, please? We're only giving out oxygen to people of this demographic today. It's like, just freely giving out in this way. And so Dharma teachings are offered in this way. So the word that's often called clinging, attachment, all of these things, is upadana, and dana is in there. Dana is in upadana. You can hear that, I think. Adana means not dana, like it's not freely giving, it's not freely receiving. And up is like turn the volume up. So you turned it up all the way, and it's completely not dana, not freely given, not freely participating. So this is a freely made offer, and we're freely invited to respond to that. These teachings, teachers, Gaia House itself, all of this is offered freely to us. And if you're in a position where you can give something in return, and it's not done with that expectation, then that's a really beautiful way of supporting these sessions. And if you're not in the place where you are able to do that, then this is part of why they're freely offered. Yeah, why they're not offered behind a clenched fist. Clenched fist living. And something we can notice in our meditations at times is, has the clenched fist gotten tight? Yeah, have we gotten tight around our meditation? Have we gotten tight around our sense of self? Have we gotten tight around body, heart, mind? Which is in a sense, what we're exploring today. Or are things defrosted, unfrozen, freely flowing? Yeah. So it's all interweaving stuff, and we're into the reflection part. Start a new chapter. So, to speak a little bit about the concept of self. Yeah, it seems very clear to us. We're here, and we've very kindly, many of us, put name tags on. And someone might say, "So who are you?" I'm Nathan. It's like, okay, thank you. And who are you? And it's and what do you do? And and where have you been? And what did you study? And what do you know? And all of these kind of frameworks that come together to give this presentation of self, this personality. Interesting to notice that whenever there's an experience, there is some kind of concept of ourself here operating. Yeah, and it might not grab our attention because we're kind of looking out through it, in a certain sense. In the Dharma teachings, what's often kind of drawn attention to when we look at this sense of self is how inherent it feels, how independent it feels, how free of the changing conditions it acts like it is, I'm independent of these changing conditions, and I notice, body sensations, thoughts, feelings, emotions, almost like storms that pass through. We have this wild storm, you have these wild moments of personality, and the self's there saying, oh, we had quite a moment there. I really got wound up into that story, or I really got very emotional about that moment, or I really got very, very happy. And these kind of movements, weather movements of the being. So it's important just to notice there is always this concept of self, but who does it appear to? Who does it appear to? It's almost like there's this other self which is noticing the passing nature of the self. Yeah, you kind of notice that in something a meditator gets to notice once in a while. Yeah, and upon seeing that, perhaps a meditator, and probably an advanced meditator, that they might conceive of some kind of inconceivable, non-conceptual self. Yeah. And they kind of hold this, there's this kind of like wider view of like, you can't ever pin it down. There's this unfindability, or an experience. Some people would say, I had this experience of no self. Had this experience of no self. What exactly they mean there, as you unpick it, might be quite interesting to investigate and also see, does it really stand up, or is it, the self had an experience of not so much of this stuff going on, but there was a self here experiencing all of that. So it's helpful to have a sense of, it's always there. When there's an appearance, it's always there. It can get very, very quiet, or it can be really, really obvious. And so, in the way that I practice and teach and explore and have been taught, is really to see the self as this movement along a spectrum or a range that gets very, very upadanad, up, gets very, very tight, and gets very, very open and free. And we want to probably find out how we can move up and down that scale, and particularly down into the fading, quietening of the self. Because a lot of the freedom that we experience, or an experience with a lot of freedom in it, to put it the other way around, has a lot less self. Has a lot less self-concern, self-centeredness. And so skillful degree or aspect of our experience to pay attention to and find the ways that we can be skillful with it. Yeah. So we have a sense of being here, we have a sense of ourselves, sense of our individuality, yeah, and in some way has some connection to body here. And when we meditate, we tune into the body. Body's here, great gift, helps us be present. Yeah, body's here, it's listening to the sounds that are coming and going. Heart seems to be here, some emotional resonance, some subtle body vibrations, some, subtle thought forms. Mind here with its intellect, with its attention, with its intentions. Yeah, who made those intentions at the beginning? Was that you? Was that you? Yeah, it feels like it, right? All of that, all of those intentions, all of those thoughts, all of those sensations, all of those feelings, they come and they go, and it's made of parts. This self, made of parts, and each part of it, the body that says a part, comes and goes. It's in this flow. Joanna Macy, who has this kind of lovely term for the human being she finds herself to be. Some of you may know her work with deep ecology and opening to, our environmental. We're environmental beings. We're other nature beings on the earth. Yeah, and she has this lovely phrase for herself that I am a flow through. Yeah, I am this flow through, this kind of part of a channel in which experiences, sensations, thoughts, feelings. Yeah, intentions, attentions, awareness, they all just flow through. There isn't some fixed thing that it's flowing through, even. Yeah, it's just this flow through of things. It would be really, really helpful to see that. People who study even like this present moment in which I notice the flowing through, it's just a very recent past. It's a very recent past. It's almost like we're looking backwards at just what's just gone by. In a sense, we just get this snapshot of a moment of who we are, how we are, when we look, and then we sense, oh, that's who I am. Yeah? And that grip of the attention gets hold of that and it's like, oh, this is how I am. Yeah, you come back from meditation, you're having a, lovely, lovely meditation, things are going well, and then you notice, oh, actually I was really distracted. And in that moment we might become, oh, I am distracted. Oh, I'm rubbish at meditation. I'm really no good at this. I'm always distracted. And they take that snapshot and just kind of hold it in front of ourselves, saying, you see, you've got to face reality. This is how we really are. And we get that fixation comes together in that way. And yet, again, turning back, we see it's all a flow through. It's all a flow through, including this snapshot. It's all just flowing through. It's just this idea. Yeah. And so we tend to lean towards a sense of a permanent sense of self. Yeah, permanent sense of self just feels like it. Yeah, I've always been this way. Yeah. Like we kind of look in the mirror and say, okay, so I'm going a bit grayer, and hairstyles change, but that's just the new me, and there's this changing self viewed within a permanent self. It's like, yeah, that's me for sure. There I am. As I get thinner or heavier, self continues, seemingly independent from all of that. So we don't necessarily need to kind of dig into and unpick and retain and sustain a sense of the ephemerality of experience, or the impossibility of finding a self or non-self and all of this. But I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a sense that the skill of noticing this is helpful, because we can get stuck in it. Can get stuck in a self-view. Yeah. You can get stuck in a sense of, I'm always like this. And I think we need skillful languaging around that, so that we can really shift from being fixed to being fluid. Yeah. Now, emptiness teachings actually go even further than that, to say, the self neither is nor is not happening. Yeah, even. Yeah. So not just from fixed to fluid to kind of, an appearance of things. And that can be really, really helpful. That we actually dive into body, heart, mind, everything that can actually make up this sense of self, all the way through. It doesn't really exist or not exist. Yeah. But a little bit farther in, from the edge of not really existing, I wish to explore how we relate with a less fixed sense of us as meditators, and how we can build up an appropriate response to that. So, reflecting back on this meditation, we were practicing a really beautiful Tibetan word, gom, getting familiar with. Yeah, I don't quite know how you pronounce it in Tibetan, but I heard it's gom. Getting to know, becoming familiar with body, heart, mind. That becoming familiar is a sense of being sensitive with non-reactivity. Being sensitive with non-reactivity. And in a sense, that very practice is an expression of being more awake, being more free, being more liberated, being less clenched fist. That sensitive non-reaction is like, how am I? How is the body? How is the heart? And we're just asking, I want to get to know. I want to get to know. And what I get to know is not so fixed. And so I'm already stepping into the sense of, the flowing through of body sensations. The flowing through of heart, mind, contractions, releases. This moment, I'm just getting to know you. And as I get to know you, you change. It's really good for us to be sensitive and non-reactive to those parts that make up the sense of who we feel ourselves to be. And I would say, and I can't imagine anyone here is going to argue against it, but as I say, we'll open up for reflections later, it's probably good for all of us. It's probably good for humanity. It's probably good for all living beings that we take some time to be sensitive, receptive, non-reactive to the body, heart, mind, thoughts, feelings, emotions, intentions, potential actions that arise to us, wherever they arise from, however they're held, and however they go. We're not going to go too much into how did they come to be? How did they, but can we meet it? Can we hold it? Can we let it go? Particularly if it doesn't serve, you let it go. And this begins to open what we might call, a virtuous circle. And we probably know the vicious circles or the negativity circles that are possible with the escalation. A small, unpleasant body sensation met with reactivity becomes more unpleasant, which leads to more reactivity. I'm going to get rid of this. I shouldn't have this, and that we're into upadana, we're into the clenched fist living. The other sense is like, this is what's here. Let's make some more space. We've suddenly gotten quite a lot more guests for dinner. Let's get out more bowls and everyone's going to have a little less, but there's plenty for everyone. There's this lovely saying I read in Calais, and we'll be going back to Calais for a retreat soon with the refugee community, and if you want to hear more about that, then you can probably find it. We're calling it Humanity in Action. We're going to go to Calais and support refugee NGOs. But I saw some sticker on a fridge or something there, and it said, if you have too much, build a longer table, not a higher fence. And just that kind of sense of how we engage with our experience is that, I'm having a lot of energy in my body right now. Can I build a longer table? Can I make a lot more space? Not actually get up more resistance because this is overwhelming. And that possibility, when we try it out on the smaller stuff in life, we realize, this works. And then when the bigger stuff starts to come, it's like, okay, this probably follows the same pattern. The little tiddly, puddly ripples and the tidal waves, maybe they follow the same thing. And maybe the heart isn't as limited as the mind sometimes thinks it is. Maybe I can open to this. But trust yourself, trust your experience, get to know what you can and can't do. So we're getting to know our experience, and we need this for an appropriate response. We need this. We need to get to know what's here. Because at certain times it might be, actually, let's cool off, let's step back, let's open the eyes, let's have a conversation, whatever it is, yeah? So we have this GOM, we have meditation as deep listening. Meditation as deep listening. Which again, as we would say, I'm sure that's a core skill that we need in life, in our interpersonal relationships, and probably for how we meet, challenging times. But also, meditation means wise cultivation. Yeah, in that sense, there's never nothing we can do. Yeah, there's never nothing we can do, and so it really supports us. First, deep listening. Deep listening. It would be like if we were trying to grow a garden, and we just said, regardless of the climate that I live in, regardless of the season, regardless of the condition of the soil, regardless of the weather, I'm just going to plant these seeds because these are the kind of seeds I think will grow. But we learn about the conditions, we learn about the situation, and then we adjust. We bring our practice to be appropriate. If there's a lot of agitation, does it make sense to always do the way we were doing? Yeah? Or are there ways of soothing practices that would work better for us? If we're really low on energy, does it make sense to sit the way we always sit? Yeah. I think, interestingly, for many of us with meditation, we just sit. I did my sitting today. This concept of just being with things as they are. Yeah. Or we can have this concept, of meditation. It's just following the breath. That's what meditation means. It means paying attention to breath after breath after breath. And that's it. Meditation would be best judged by, the quantity of breaths that I followed, as opposed to a view that it might be about cultivating qualities. Yeah? So when we mentioned our intentions here, what are our intentions for coming here? What do we see we want to have more of in the world? Nobody mentioned, I want to have more people in the world who can, sit for a period of time and count that they have been with this many breaths wholeheartedly, without wandering, without their mind wandering. And I was really disappointed to see that nobody mentioned that. I thought it was a bit of a letdown, all this kind of peace and kindness and calm. And it's fine, but don't you think more breaths would be a better goal? So maybe next time when I ask, if you can just mention that you'd like more breaths, that would make me happy. I can remember on one retreat I'd been sitting there following these breath instructions for a while, and then one of the teachers said, the point isn't to follow the breath. And I was like, what? Almost felt like, the record scratch or the what? It's not to follow. Okay, so what is it? What is it? What is it we're actually doing? What is it we're actually doing? And so we have this deep listening, we have this wise cultivation to bring into being what's actually needed. We can see this in our postures. Do we always meditate in one posture? Are we imagining that sitting posture is meditation? Yeah, so this meditation becoming a thing instead of a fluid thing. Do we do standing meditations? Do we do walking meditations on a regular basis? Do we do reclining meditations? Have we gotten to know what they do in relationship to the conditions of body, heart and mind? Yeah? Do they do something different? Do they open something different? Do they enliven something differently? Yeah. And so what I'm kind of talking around here is this increasing our level of sensitivity to get a sense of things are actually fluid and flowing. They're not as fixed as we think they are. And in that non-fixedness, maybe there's the possibility that an appropriate response will arise through experimentation. Yeah, through experimentation. And so one of the areas we can get more experimentation is, broadening who we listen to, or where we gather, ideas around practice. We at the end of retreats when we're teaching, we say, there's all of these teachings on Dharma seed. This, I'm recording myself, I tend to record myself, just in case I say something worthwhile. And I put it out onto Dharma seed. There's now more talks and guided meditations and teachings and explorations of Dharma on Dharma Seed than we can listen to in a lifetime of continuous listening, which would be a terrible idea, of trying to cover all this. But the question then is, do we always listen to the same people, the same ideas? One time Rob Babea, who's one of my favourite people to listen to, and I try and not only listen to, said at one point, that he's had people who would say, oh, you can never listen to that talk too many times. Now that's really a mistake. Of course you can listen to something too many times. Of course you can. You could listen to it too few times as well. Constantly changing would be the other end of that extreme. Yeah, it's like, I always listen to a new talk. If you listen back to certain ones that did touch us, did open us to something, it's also really helpful. But there's some middle way here to find. Yeah. Some people like listening to guided meditations, and some people, feel like, I don't like guided meditations. And again, it's like, we want to be appropriate, but we don't want to end up being fixed. And at a certain point, maybe a guided meditation, even if we don't really like it, maybe we listen to it outside of a meditation, or it's a different kind of meditation. Just checking, are we open to new ideas? Or are we only want my ideas, or I have enough, and now I just do it this way? Because there are different ways of being, there are different things we can cultivate. Yeah, and we can turn good theory into practice, and that can deepen all of those things. So, yeah, they have a place even when we don't have a thirst for them. And the thought that arose to me, and I wrote it out in an email I sent to people who are connected with the dependent origination site, comparing them to what I was told is meant to be a principle behind rehydration salts. So if you get dehydrated, you can have those salts. I think they have a bit of lemon and salt and sugar together in there. The person said when you really need them, they taste good to you. This was in India where quite a few people were getting diarrhea and other things, and so it's like when you need them, they'll taste good to you. But at that point where they start tasting like armpits or body odor, then that's the time to stop. To stop taking them. We can have those kinds of degrees of sensitivity. Yeah. So don't push yourself too hard in any one particular direction, but also don't underexplore the richness of this Dharma teachings. So just kind of wrapping this up, and then we're open to any kind of questions, reflections you want to bring from there. One of the ways that I try and see it is that we have a fixed sense of what we can do and also of what we should do. And some of the time we really should probably step outside of that idea and not be who we tend to tell ourselves we are. Yeah. And at other times it's going to be really helpful to support and nourish a softening and soothing and supportive foundation for this being and these intentions that we wish to cultivate. So I hope that makes some sense, and I don't doubt that your reflections back will certainly help me to see more ways that I would wish to explore and express this. But I hope that that feels like it's something helpful to get a sense of. Yeah. So is there anything you'd like to bring into the session? Feel free to just unmute yourself and say that, or you can also use the chat. The first participant here to share a reflection was speaking a little bit about the Thai forest Theravadan tradition, having this emphasis upon the insight of anicca, impermanence, inconstancy, that things are all a flow, that things are seen this way is a sense of this awakening, still flowing water, quality to the lived experience. And is that what we're talking about here? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, very nice, very nice. Yes. So, yeah, mentioning this anicca quality of all of our experience, that experience itself is inconstant, and we can really overlook that. And so I think, yes, it becomes a very core principle behind a lot of things. And it's very useful and skillful to kind of encourage us to have a sense of things having the nature of being more fluid, and also by understanding that they are more fluid, there's a kind of an additional insight, rather than, well, just don't hold on, don't do things like this, is that why are they like that? The reason that they're like that is because they depend on other fluid flowing things. And it's all fluid flowing things, constructed together to appear to be solid entities. And we are one of those solid entities. A meditation is one of those solid entities. A breath is one of those apparently thingness things. Yeah, and the dukkha of experience, the stress, distress, and the build-up, and upadana, the clenching fists, all depend on these sense of there are fixed things to get and to get rid of, and the getting and getting rid of will make this self, as felt again as a fixed thing, happy. And you actually see, actually it's all fluid things dependently leaning on each other, and there's no sense of actually solidity through this whole stuff. And actually, then where does happiness come from? Where is happiness sustained? How could it be more longer lasting? It becomes this kind of deep question, and actually we find it through our practice. Deeper listening, lighter sense of self, lighter sense of building up of things into thingnesses actually opens something into quite a delightful experience. And so the inclination then is, so what would happen if we kept doing that? Opening the grip, softening the sense of the thingness of things, including the thingness of this self that is engaging with these practices. And yeah, it kind of can begin from a dissolution through the relatively helpful insight of anicca into the deeper and deeper insights of dependence arising of any formation at all. So yeah, thanks for the reflection, Andy. The second reflection coming from a participant here was in relationship to the sense of having a history, having a past, and that really impacts what feels possible and available for us in this moment. And how do we deal with that? How do we relate to that in a skillful way? Or are we just, that's just something we have to accept, that this is how we are, and this has happened, and we will always be impacted by our past? Yes, yeah. I feel like I understand what you're saying. And so if I say some things in relationship to that, and we can see if it starts to make sense in return. So there's this sense that the historiological self, the self that arises dependent on our history of what has happened to us, the self that arises in relationship to memories and what we recall of those memories, and how we hold all of that is one step already. It's like, these things, I remember that they happened this way. Is quite different than us saying to ourselves, this is how it happened. This is how I was. It's like, well, this is how I remember it. I personally don't have a very good memory, but what I can remember about people who study memory is that memories are not very accurate representations of what happened. But aside from the details, certain events have happened to us in our existence. And some of those events really matter, and they've really shaped us psychologically. And some of those, it's really helpful to open and explore and find new perspectives on with others. Some of them, it can just be something that we say, okay, I'm reacting, responding in relationship to that. I can notice in myself that there's still a tendency to try and avoid that kind of thing happening again. And so if we feel like opening and exploring to that, we might find possibly the helpful thing in relationship, in reflection, is to actually see it as a less fixed thing and a more dynamic moment in experience in the way that we reflect on it. And just taking from there into this moment is like, and this moment too has this nature. I probably didn't notice it there, but what does it do to this moment when I notice it here? So what can we do, here and now to get that sense that actually all that's flowed through doesn't necessarily need to impact what is currently in this sense of flow? So what I would say, I think, is the easiest thing for me, and I would guess it might be for many people, is actually just to tune into the body right now and see if I soften, relax, and what that means is invite to soften and relax. Does that shape how I feel about this moment? Yeah, we say, oh yeah, it does shape how I feel about this moment by softening, relaxing. Perception of what the present flow is affected by how much relaxation is able to happen. If I really like soften the face, the eyebrows, the jaw, those kinds of things, it starts to shape how the heart and the mind are active and responding in this moment. It starts to affect body, heart, mind. That also then affects memories that arise into this body, heart, mind. They're actually held in a different container, and how they're held really shapes how much I feel I need to either react to them, follow the instruction they seem to come with. And so that can be a way through. So if body is accessible, then that invitation to relax, not demand to relax, that's demanding is part of this clenched fist living, yeah. So inviting to relax if you wish to relax. And as those memories come into being, maybe that kind of can be a supportive way. Yeah. A whole other pathway that we can do if body isn't accessible to us is a metta practice, METTA, the cultivation of goodwill. And what that basically does is it starts to remap new neural pathways. Yeah, so we have familiar pathways that we walk, the historiological self, the memorial self, the ways that I need to, act, to protect, to look after, to care for those things that are important, tends to run along particular routes. And metta starts to, do a little bit of roadworks in the heart and the mind and develop new routes that we can kind of find coming into being and can really surprise us, that we can really generate the qualities of goodwill. And that also, therefore, generates a little bit more safety for us and the capacity to create more safety and well-being for others. So that's like just two ways we might play with that. Yeah, thank you. Yes, anything else feels helpful to drop into the session? The third reflection here, coming from a participant who's recently exploring a therapeutic dialogue relationship, noticing that when they are sharing things, there's an inclination to share what's wrong about the self and making the self into this kind of problem, and using this idea that actually there's a current self here which is fluid and flowing and enlivened, and there are also past selves. And what we are exploring are other beings, and that really opens out the possibility for forgiveness and other different ways of relating to the self. And this was followed by a second reflection about time and feeling that maybe these teachings are suggesting to let go of all sense of time, but actually there's something useful about knowing when it is, and conventionally it's this year and this month and these days, and time has moved, and time is useful. So just wondering how that relates to that, or just sharing that reflection as well about time and its usefulness. Yeah, very, very beautiful thoughts and good reflections. Yes, what you're talking about is kind of something I didn't go too far into at this point. It kind of felt like it might be territory for another exploration, but like this middle way between self and, where we kind of inhabit naturally. Most people who are, as you mentioned, functioning reasonably well in the world have a sense of self, and they have a sense that they've always been that self. They were kind of born into it, and the body developed, the being developed. The girl or the boy went through their education with that sense of self, and had experiences, and gets to now and comes into this meditation. It's all the same self, all the way back from there to here, and we have that sense. And then Dharma teachings start to pull away at that, and you're like, well, upon what carried it all the way through, and we investigate body, heart, mind, completely, constantly, fluidly changing. And some people might then say, oh, that view now is wrong. The fixed view through a life is wrong. There is no self. The Buddha said the self is an illusion. And of course, those of us who know the teachings, well, will actually, catch up with that person and say, no, he didn't. He said, neither self nor not self is a location to stand if you want to free yourself from dukkha. If you want to free this body, heart, mind. Neither place is a place to rest, put your bags down. Yeah, it's all not stable. Yeah, it's all not a reliable view. So then within there, we're then free to play in the ways that you played, which is like, well, I have a sense of self, this present moment self, and I have this self I used to be, this character I used to be, because I can turn towards them from this present moment, open, aware experience, this memory, this vivid felt sense of how I recall it went back there, how that being felt, and I feel on behalf, and there is this wonderful sense of not being fused with this being who I'm paying attention to. There's not this attentional fusion, it's actually the attentional experience, and I'm aware of. And in that sense, then we can actually have a creative, wholesome, nourishing, loving, forgiving, kind relationship to the being who we felt ourselves to be earlier in our existence. In the same way as the other characters in that memory can also be met. It's like, oh, actually, that bully, I can now offer kindness. Like, well, what a horrible thing, to do, and how horrible it would have been if I were them, and that compassion can kind of come through in those ways. So that skillful use of the mind and the imagination to play within this spectrum of neither self nor not self, and I think it's a really beautiful utility that you brought to that. And around the idea of time, I'm certainly inviting through a reflection on the fluidity and the flow of time and the non-findability even of time, and we could have gone as far as the non-findability of a present moment, this thin sliver between past and present, between future and past, that somehow is balancing here, and actually it must be so narrow it isn't possible to even actually be in it. We just notice the just gone. It's kind of like where we exist is in the very recent past, in terms of the perceptible possibilities. But we also want to maintain the conventional, what some teachings talk about, the ultimate and relative, or the agreed upon appearances of things. And we say, if you say I'll meet you at 1:30 tomorrow, and I turn up and say, well, time's empty, that's why I'm here at 4, you'd be like, well, this friendship is also empty, and I'll find someone who can turn up on time and actually apologizes when they're late. So there's this conventional realities in which we fluidly flow, but we also notice that in none of these moments am I a fixed entity, and nor is another. And that can really open up a very delightful sense for more possibilities and more well-being, and more of those gifts of seeing, so then this self that I find myself to be always late, can actually change and be sometimes early. And in that sense, is always a disappointment. Is actually a being to be met with kindness, just as you did in the therapeutic field. And the deeper insights that you also shared there is like the being that we fabricate through what we recall and what we bring up is also very, very beautiful insight, and I'm sure really helpful to bring into the exploration you're going through. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a really lovely point on which actually to kind of draw this to a close. And I hope that this has been supportive and opens areas for exploration. I really appreciate everyone who shared their own reflections with us here, and also all those who kind of held the space in really kind of beautiful, dedicated listening. And I really wish you well in your practice, and look forward to our paths re-entwining shortly. And if there's anything I can do that will be of help, do let me know. Okay, so take care, and see you again soon.
Thank you for listening. To learn how you can support the teachers and Dharma Seed, please visit dharmaseed.org/donate.